What makes Ford really different is our Pro business. You know, we have our electric vehicle business, our gas and hybrid business, but Pro is really unique.
Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, has just spilled the beans on the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. The truth about hydrogen cars that all of us have been suspecting. It's about to completely change everything. In a landscape increasingly defined by the push towards sustainable transportation, Ford's CEO announcements regarding hydrogen-powered vehicles have sparked significant debate within the automotive industry. And let me tell you, it's got the rest of the industry scratching their heads, wondering what the heck is going on. Let me explain what's happening. The recent announcement of Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, threw some major shade at hydrogen-powered cars, suggesting they just aren't going to cut it in the real world. And let me tell you, it's got the industry buzzing. You see, Ford has been exploring the potential of hydrogen fuel cell technology. During a press conference, Farley made it clear that it might not be the miracle solution everyone's been banking on. And let's be honest, when the big bosses at Ford start getting skeptical, you know it's time to pay attention. Farley didn't mince words. He straight up said that while Ford's exploring this hydrogen fuel cell stuff, putting it into action on a large scale is just not practical. The guy's got a point though. I mean, we've all heard the hype about hydrogen being the future of clean driving, but if the experts are having doubts, maybe it's time to pump the brakes and reevaluate. Now, I know what you're thinking, but hydrogen is the future of clean driving. How can Ford be so skeptical? Well, my friends, that's exactly the question we need to be asking. Farley's cautious approach signals a shift in Ford's strategy as they navigate the ever-evolving landscape of electric and alternative fuel vehicles. It's a pivotal moment for sure, as the company tries to figure out the best path forward. And let me tell you, with Farley at the helm, they're not just going to jump on the hydrogen hype train without a thorough reality check. This announcement is a wake-up call for the entire industry. The transition to eco-friendly cars isn't as straightforward as we'd hoped. There are pitfalls and challenges lurking around every corner, and even the big players like Ford are having to rethink their plans. But hey, at least they're being upfront about it, right? Gotta respect a CEO who's willing to call it like he sees it. But why? Now let's talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to hydrogen-powered cars. Because, let me tell you, the challenges facing this technology are no joke, and Ford's CEO Jim Farley is calling it like he sees it. First off, the serious lack of hydrogen refueling infrastructure. I mean, seriously, how are people supposed to keep their hydrogen-powered rides fueled up when there are barely any stations around, even in major cities? It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and that's a huge deterrent for potential buyers. But that's not the only hurdle these hydrogen cars have to clear. They're also significantly more expensive to produce and purchase compared to good old battery electric vehicles. We're talking about higher price tags, not just for the cars themselves, but also for maintaining that hydrogen infrastructure. It's a double whammy that's gonna make it tough for the average Joe to make the switch. And let's not forget the added complexity of hydrogen technology. These babies aren't just your run-of-the-mill electric vehicles. They've got a whole bunch of extra moving parts, like hydrogen tanks and fuel cells, plus batteries to store the electricity. That's a recipe for more mechanical issues and maintenance headaches down the line, which is the last thing anyone wants to deal with. Now, let's get real about this whole hydrogen car thing, shall we? Because when you dig a little deeper, it becomes clear that this technology isn't as clean and green as it might seem at first glance. Let's talk about the dirty little secret of how most hydrogen is actually produced these days. Turns out the majority of it comes from good old fossil fuels, like natural gas, through a process called steam methane reforming. And you know what that means? Yep, you guessed it. A whole lot of carbon dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere. Not exactly the eco-friendly solution we were hoping for, is it? Now, I know what you're thinking, but wait, what about this green hydrogen stuff I've been hearing about? Well, my friends, that's where things get a little more complicated. Sure, you can produce hydrogen through electrolysis, using renewable energy and all that jazz, but here's the kicker. It's an insanely energy-intensive process, and you end up losing a ton of that precious energy in the conversion. In fact, experts estimate that making hydrogen can suck up to 3 times as much energy as the vehicle actually ends up using to power itself. Talk about inefficiency, am I right? Compare that to good old battery electric vehicles, which can directly convert electricity into motion, and you'll start to see why Jim Farley and the gang at Ford are feeling a little skeptical about the whole hydrogen thing. It's just not as clean or efficient as we'd been led to believe. And when you're trying to build a sustainable transportation future, those are some pretty crucial factors to consider. Let's talk about that pesky little thing called energy efficiency. You see, when it comes to converting electricity into actual driving power, hydrogen vehicles are seriously lacking. We're talking about a whopping 62% of that precious energy being lost in the conversion process, from electricity to hydrogen and back to electricity again. Now, let's compare that to good old battery electric vehicles, which typically only experience around a 20% energy loss in their much more streamlined conversion process. That's a huge difference, folks, and it really makes you wonder how hydrogen can be considered the future of clean driving when it's just so darn inefficient. So, while the hydrogen enthusiasts out there might be dreaming of a world where these clean burning cars rule the roads, the reality is a lot more complicated. The energy losses, the storage issues, the logistical nightmares, it's enough to make your head spin. And no wonder Ford's CEO Jim Farley is feeling a little skeptical about the whole thing. And hey, let's be real, the folks at Ford know a thing or two about building kick-ass vehicles. So if even they're hesitant to fully embrace hydrogen, you know there's gotta be some serious issues under the hood. It's time to face facts, folks. The road to a greener tomorrow is going to be a lot bumpier than we thought. Now, I know the hydrogen enthusiasts out there are probably feeling a little deflated right about now, but hey, let's not give up hope just yet. Maybe with some serious technological advancements and a whole lot of innovative thinking, the folks in the lab coats can figure out a way to make this hydrogen thing work. After all, if anyone can crack the code, it's probably the geniuses behind the wheel of the blue oval. But you know what they say, the best things in life are worth fighting for. And with leaders like Farley keeping a close eye on the numbers, I have a feeling the future of eco-friendly driving is about to get a whole lot more interesting. And Ford isn't the only company exploring hydrogen vehicles. Toyota also entered the hydrogen car market, but its efforts haven't been as successful as expected. Let me break it down for you. Toyota Mirai. Turns out a group of Toyota Mirai owners are taking the company to court, and they're not holding back. You see, these Mirai owners are alleging that Toyota completely misled them when it came to the whole ease of refueling bit. According to the lawsuit, Toyota's marketing and sales teams were painting a picture of seamless hydrogen fueling with accessible and operational stations galore. But the reality? Well, let's just say it's a far cry from what these folks were promised. Apparently, many Mirai owners are finding themselves in a real pickle when it comes to actually filling up their tanks. We're talking about having to travel ridiculous distances to find a working hydrogen station, and in some cases, they're coming up completely empty-handed. Can you imagine the panic of being stranded with an inoperable vehicle? Talk about a transportation nightmare. And it doesn't stop there, folks. The lawsuit also alleges that the refueling process itself is a total pain in the neck. Apparently, it can take several hours to fully charge the Mirai, and there have even been instances where the pump gets frozen onto the car, forcing owners to wait over 30 minutes for it to thaw out. Not exactly the lightning fast refueling experience Toyota was touting, is it? In fact, the lawsuit even mentions that the $15,000 hydrogen fuel card Toyota provided has become practically worthless due to the astronomical cost of refueling. Talk about a rude awakening for these poor folks who were probably counting on that to last them for years. Now, I don't know about you, but this all sounds like a pretty clear-cut case of false advertising and consumer deception to me. These Mirai owners trusted Toyota's promises, and now they're feeling seriously let down. And you know what they say, and when the rubber hits the road, the truth always comes out. The biggest issue seems to be the sad state of the hydrogen refueling infrastructure, especially in California, where a ton of these Mirai have been sold. Turns out there just aren't enough operational stations around, and the ones that are open are often plagued by broken pumps and compatibility issues. Can you imagine the panic of driving around desperately trying to find a place to refuel only to end up stranded? Not exactly the dream ride these folks signed up for. And get this, the Mirai's actual driving range is falling way short of Toyota's big claims. So not only are these owners struggling to find a place to fill up, but when they do, they can't even make it very far before they're back on the hunt for another station. It's a recipe for transportation disaster, if you ask me. Now, I get that the whole hydrogen car thing is still a relatively new frontier, and the infrastructure is still being built out. But come on, Toyota, you can't be making all these lofty promises without being able to back them up. These Mirai owners trusted your brand, and now they're feeling seriously let down. And I don't blame them one bit for taking legal action. This whole situation is a prime example of why the road to a sustainable driving future is going to be bumpy one. Sure, hydrogen might be the golden child of eco-friendly tech right now, now. But if the real-world experience is a far cry from the hype, then Houston, we've got a problem. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, the whole range issue. Toyota was boasting about this thing having a whopping 402-mile driving range. But turns out, many Mirai owners are lucky to squeeze out 250 to 300 miles before needing to refuel. Ouch. Talk about a letdown, right? I mean, can you imagine the panic of constantly having to pull over to gas up when you were promised the freedom of the open road? It's enough to make any driver pull their hair out. And it's not just the range that's leaving Mirai owners frustrated. The performance is also falling flat. With a meager 182 horsepower, this thing is about as zippy as a turtle in molasses, especially when you're trying to merge onto the highway or make a quick getaway. Heck, it takes a snail-like 6.2 seconds to hit $60 amp. I don't know about you, but that's definitely not the kind of power I'd be looking for in my daily driver. Let's talk about one of the biggest pain points for Toyota Mirai owners, the skyrocketing cost of hydrogen fuel. Cost and potential risks. We need to talk about this, because let me tell you, this is not the kind of price hike anyone wants to see when they're trying to drive into the future of clean transportation. I mean, think about it. Back in 22, a single kilogram of hydrogen would set you back around $13. That's not too shabby, right? But fast forward to 24, and suddenly we're looking at a whopping $36 per kilogram. It's a classic case of the rug being pulled out from under you, and I can only imagine how frustrated Mirai owners must be feeling. I mean, they took the leap of faith, trusted Toyota's promises, and now they're left dealing with a financial burden that's enough to make anyone want to ditch their hydrogen-powered dreams and go back to good old gasoline. Let's not forget about the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I know what you're thinking, but hydrogen fuel cells only emit water vapor, so how can they be bad for the environment? Well, here's the catch. The production of hydrogen itself is often a major culprit when it comes to carbon dioxide emissions. You see, the most common method for making hydrogen is through a process called steam methane reforming, which relies heavily on natural gas. And let me tell you, that process is pumping out a whole lot of carbon dioxide, up to 38 kilograms per kilogram of hydrogen produced. Yikes! That's practically on par with the emissions from good old fossil fuels. Not exactly the clean burning dream we were promised, is it? But wait, there's more. Even when it comes to the so-called green hydrogen production methods like water electrolysis powered by renewable energy, the environmental benefits aren't exactly straightforward. Life cycle assessments have shown that the overall efficiency of these processes can actually lead to higher energy consumption, which if sourced from fossil fuels kind of negates the whole climate-friendly angle. And let's not forget about the other sneaky ways hydrogen can wreak havoc on the environment. Did you know that it's actually classified as an indirect greenhouse gas? That's right, folks. When hydrogen escapes into the atmosphere, it can contribute to some serious short-term warming effects. Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing, am I right? And let's talk about the land use and biodiversity impacts. Those renewable energy farms needed for green hydrogen. They're gobbling up precious natural habitats and disrupting ecosystems left and right. It's a whole Pandora's box of environmental consequences that we've barely even scratched the surface of. So while the hydrogen hype train might be chugging along, it's clear that we've got some serious homework to do before we can truly call this the clean energy solution of the future. The reality is a lot messier and more complicated than the shiny marketing might have us believe. But hey, this is the wake-up call the industry needs to start getting serious about sustainability. Maybe Ford is doing the right thing, am I right? But the thing is, the electric vehicle industry isn't working for Ford either. But how exactly? Well, let's dissect it together. Ford's electric vehicle industry failure. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ford struggling in the electric vehicle market? No way. But my friends, the reality is a little more complicated than that. Let's talk about the financial losses that Ford is facing. According to the experts, Ford's electric vehicle division is staring down the barrel of a potential $5.5 billion loss in 2024 alone. Ouch. Talk about a gut punch, right? But what's really driving this financial strain, you ask? Well, it's a perfect storm of high development costs, manufacturing expenses, and the whole transition from those good old internal combustion engines to the new electric powertrains. And get this, the company's already reported an eye-watering $8 billion loss in its EV segment. Talk about a steep learning curve. It just goes to show that even the mighty Ford is having a tough time cracking the code when it comes to making EVs a profitable endeavor. Now, I know what you're thinking. But Ford's been around forever. Surely they know a thing or two about making cars. And you'd be right to an extent. The thing is, the electric vehicle market is a whole different ballgame, and it's moving at lightning speed. Legacy automakers like Ford are having to completely rethink their approach, and that's easier said than done. You see, the market dynamics and consumer preferences surrounding electric vehicles have shifted significantly, and Ford's finding itself in a bit of a pickle. It's like they're trying to navigate a minefield with landmines of challenges at every turn. Let me tell you about the whole sales momentum thing. Remember those early adopters who were all about electric vehicles, even if they had to shell out a pretty penny? Well, it turns out that crowd's been pretty much tapped out. Now, Ford's struggling to reel in the mainstream buyers, and you know what's holding them back? The good old price tag. Yep, even with all the price cuts Ford's been throwing around, electric vehicles are still generally more expensive than their good old gas-guzzling counterparts. And let's be real, when the average Joe's trying to stretch their budget, that extra chunk of change can make all the difference. But the challenges don't stop there. Oh no. List of issues. Like, we've got a whole slew of consumer concerns that are really throwing a wrench in Ford's electric vehicle plans. First up, the dreaded range anxiety. And you know, that little voice in the back of your head that's constantly wondering if you'll make it to the next charging station before your battery kicks the bucket. And let's not forget about the reliability of those charging stations themselves. I mean, who wants to be stuck waiting for a frozen pump to thaw out? Am I right? Despite Ford's best efforts to ramp up their electric vehicle game, there's one glaring issue that's really throwing a wrench in the works: the lack of reliable and readily available charging stations. It's like trying to play a video game without a controller, or baking a cake without any ingredients. Just doesn't quite work, does it? Now, I know what you're thinking, but I see charging stations popping up all over the place. And you're not wrong. The problem is, it's not nearly enough to keep up with the growing demand for electric vehicles. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with a leaky faucet. You're just not gonna get the job done. And let's not forget about the whole reliable part of the equation. I mean, how many times have you pulled up to a charging station only to find it out of service or completely empty? It's enough to make even the most die-hard electric vehicle enthusiast want to throw in the towel and go back to their good old gas-guzzling ride. But here's the real kicker. This lack of charging infrastructure isn't just a minor inconvenience. Nope, it's a full-blown barrier to EV adoption. Imagine trying to convince someone to buy an electric car when they're constantly worried about getting stranded on the side of the road. Talk about a tough sell. And let's not forget about Ford's role in all this. Sure, they're doing their part by churning out more and more electric vehicle models, but if the charging network can't keep up, it's all for naught. It's like building a fancy new house without any electricity. Sure, it looks great, but it's not much use, is it? And let's not forget about the competition. The electric vehicles market is downright cutthroat these days. You've got the likes of Tesla and those scrappy Chinese upstarts, all vying for a slice of the pie. And you know what they've got that Ford's struggling with? Aggressive pricing strategies and cutting-edge tech. It's like a high-stakes game of who can make the coolest, most affordable electric vehicle. And Ford's kind of falling behind. Ford's been forced to make some pretty tough calls when it comes to their electric vehicle plans. First, they had to pull the plug on a previously announced electric SUV. Talk about a tough break, right? And to top it off, they're also delaying the launch of some brand new EV models. Yikes. Talk about a case of the brakes. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Ford's supposed to be at the forefront of this electric revolution, and you're not wrong, but the reality is the electric vehicle landscape is a constantly shifting battlefield, and even the mightiest of players can't always predict what's around the next corner. But what is Ford's plan if both the electric vehicle and hydrogen car aren't working for them? What's their strategy? You see, Ford's been taking a long, hard look at the shifting landscape of the automotive market, and they've decided to make a major strategic pivot. But instead of doubling down on their electric vehicle plans, they're actually hitting the brakes and shifting their focus to something a little more, well, hybrid. Let me tell you how this is a game changer. That's right, folks. Hybrids are a game changer. Ford's decided to shelve their plans for a shiny new lineup of all-electric SUVs, and instead, they're going all in on the good old gas-electric hybrid technology. And you know what? It's a move that's got a lot of people scratching their heads. But when you really dig into it, it all starts to make a whole lot of sense. You see, the folks over at Ford have been watching the market closely, and they've noticed something interesting. Consumers are actually way more jazzed about hybrids than they are about pure electric vehicles. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, let's be real, the whole charging infrastructure thing is still a bit of a mess. And that whole range anxiety thing is enough to make even the most eco-conscious driver start to sweat. But with a hybrid, you get the best of both worlds. The electric power when you need it, and the gas backup for when things get a little dicey. And let's not forget about the whole family-friendly angle. So in a nutshell, Ford's made the strategic decision to pivot away from the all-electric dream and instead focus on delivering hybrid vehicles that are more in line with what today's consumers are actually clamoring for. It's like they're saying, hey, we hear you, and we're ready to give you something that's practical, accessible, and oh so flexible. Now, I know what you're thinking, but what about the whole electric revolution? Isn't Ford just giving up on the future? Well, not exactly. It's more like they're recognizing that the path to a sustainable transportation future isn't always a straight line. Sometimes you've got to take a few detours and test out different routes to see what works best. So, what do you think? Will hydrogen ever find its place in the automotive world, or is it time to focus more on electric vehicles? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.